Well, good afternoon and welcome to our congressional debate. I'm Heather McGrail, the President and CEO of the Greater Manchester Chamber. I want to thank you for joining us today to hear from candidates Caroline Leavitt and Congressman Chris Pappas. We are so happy to be able to host these events where we can really educate our business owners and professionals about the issues affecting the business community. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, Bellwether Community Credit Union, and the NHIOP for allowing us to host this in their fantastic venue. I think you all know a key function of the Manchester Chamber is to connect our business professionals to understand the issues affecting the business community. As a reminder, we are a nonpartisan organization. We do not endorse any candidates. We simply want to make sure that our business people understand their stances on key business issues. Setting aside our differences in policy or issues, I think the great equalizer here is that we can all recognize the commitment involved in being in public service, the blood, the sweat, the tears that these candidates put in running for office. So I'd like to just take a moment to applaud both candidates, Caroline Leavitt and Chris Pappas. And also want to recognize some special guests we have in the audience today. Mayor Joyce Craig. And we have former Mayor Syl Dupuis and Bob Baines sitting right next to each other over there. I see Senator Donna Soucy. Thank you, Donna. And we have our Chamber Board Chair, Janella McDonald. Where are you, Janella? There she is. And other Chamber board members in attendance, we have Nathan Saller, Shana Hawrelchek, your last name, Scott Spradling, who will be our moderator today, and Matt Kafori. Thank you all. If I missed any other elected officials in the room, please see me afterwards. But we thank you as well for your public service. Next, I'd like to invite Nathan Saller, President and CEO of Bellwether Community Credit Union, to say a few words as our presenting sponsor. Nathan.
Well, good afternoon. It's great to see all of you this afternoon. On behalf of Bellwether Community Credit Union, our 30,000 members, it's our privilege to partner with the Chamber on this afternoon's debate. For more than 100 years, Bellwether has helped residents of New Hampshire buy homes, save for the future, or grow their businesses. At Bellwether, it's our mission to help our members thrive, to help their businesses grow and prosper, and to make our communities even better places to live and work. And to that end, we believe it's crucial for members of the business community and for all of us as citizens to be fully informed on the issues that are important to each one of us. And to that end, I'd like to thank Congressman Pappas and Ms. Leavitt for being here today and sharing their time with us. And as someone who didn't grow up in this great state, but I've been a resident for over 20 years, one of the things I've come to love and appreciate about our state is just the accessibility that we have to our elected officials, to our candidates, and the entire political process. It's something we really can't take for granted, and I think the best way to not take it for granted is to be fully informed voters. And so thank you to all of you for coming out today and doing that. And finally, I just wanted to thank Heather and the incredible Chamber staff for putting together today's event. You do an excellent job, and thank you for making today happen. So thank you very much.
Okay, and now we're going to do what you all came here for. Scott Spradling will be our fantastic moderator for this afternoon. If you don't know Scott, he's an Emmy Award-winning producer, and you'll find out why pretty soon. He's also an amazing Chamber board member and a very community-engaged individual. So without further ado, I'm going to call Scott up to take the podium.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see many faces, lots of familiar faces and smiling faces. Happy campaign season. 2 weeks to go, but who's counting, right? Especially our candidates who I'm sure are working very, very hard in the stretch run. Let me just explain the format very briefly. We'll go for about the next hour or so. We will offer each candidate 2 minutes for an opening statement each and 2 minutes for a closing statement. In between will be the questions that have largely come from the membership, sending in information and feedback, and from the board of directors, asking questions of a business and economic foundational perspective. So we will give each candidate 1 minute for an answer to the question, and then if the conversation tends to move a little farther past that 60-second timeline, we'll do 30-second rebuttals, and I'll do my best to just sort of referee and perhaps every now and again shepherd the conversation while trying to stay out of the way. We have Anthony, our St. Anselm student extraordinaire, who's got the card sheets in front of me. He's going to be my fantastic timer, and he's got a yellow card that he can hold up real quick for the 15-second warning and a red card when the time is up. And then the rest of it is up to our candidates. So without further ado, introducing alphabetically, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Caroline Levitt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Congressman Chris Pappas. Yesterday, when we did this with the gubernatorial candidates, I awkwardly stood right in between the two trying to shake hands and ruined the good photograph, so this time I got out of the way. So the order of opening and closing statements was determined by a coin toss, and so based on the results of that toss, the first 2-minute opening statement goes to Ms. Levitt.
Wonderful.
The floor is yours.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, thank you so much to the Manchester Chamber for hosting today's debate. Thank you, Chris, for joining. Thank all of you for showing up. It's always great to be back at my alma mater, St. Anselm College. It's the honor of my life to be the Republican nominee in my home district, where I grew up in a small business family and was taught the values of personal responsibility and hard work at a very, very young age. In this race, I'm proud to be endorsed by the NFIB, the National Federation of Independent Businesses, our country's leading voice for small businesses. And we need a change. Over the next hour, you will hear my opponent, Chris Pappas, appear as a bipartisan, business-friendly problem solver. The truth is, over the past 2 years, he's been anything but that. He's been a partisan problem creator. And we've seen this firsthand in our small business community. 8.2 record high inflation, skyrocketing energy costs that are minimizing your profits every single day. 5.5 trillion in new spending over the last 2 years alone is robbing families in this state of $600 every single month. I'm proud to be a fiscally conservative voice endorsed by Governor Sununu. I will go to Washington, D.C. to lower your taxes, to cut regulation, reduce red tape, and get the government out of our way so you can keep more money in your pockets every single week and every single month. I am honored to be in this position. I ask for your vote on November the 8th so we can change the direction of our state and our country. Thank you again for hosting, and I look forward to your questions.
Ms. Levitt, thank you. Congressman, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Caroline, it's great to be with you once again. Thank you all for joining this conversation, and to the Greater Manchester Chamber of Commerce for hosting us here today. I grew up in a small business family here in the city of Manchester, and when you have that experience, you learn to be of use to others, and you learn that it's not about the bottom line, but about how you can look out for the community. That's what led me to get into public service in the first place. I served as an executive counselor and then was elected to Congress in 2018. And I have one of the most bipartisan records as a member of Congress. I've been proud to work across the aisle with Republicans to invest in this nation's infrastructure, into our roads and bridges and high-speed broadband, and the ways that we can create the backbone of economic success for our communities. I've supported bipartisan legislation to ensure that we're investing in our workforce, in our manufacturing sector, so that the future in the United States will be stamped with Made in America. And I've also found bipartisan ways to support our veterans and our small businesses. I chair the Small Business Caucus in Congress, was proud today to be endorsed by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I've also supported legislation to provide tax credits and rebates to businesses to lower their energy costs and to bring down the cost of health care and prescription drugs. Now, Caroline Levitt opposes all of those bills. She's one of the most radical candidates we've ever seen nominated for public office in New Hampshire. She's an election denier who believes the last election was stolen from Donald Trump. and even after the insurrection said that she would have voted to overturn the people's vote on January 6th. That's wrong, as is her position to privatize Social Security and to stand in the way of a woman's right to choose. So there's a stark contrast in this campaign, and I'm eager to have this conversation here today and to show folks that my party doesn't have a monopoly on good ideas. I'll stand up to Joe Biden when he's wrong for New Hampshire, and I'll work with anyone, Republican, Independent, or Democrat, who has a good idea about how to lower costs, how to strengthen our communities, and protect personal freedoms. So thanks for being here for this.
Congressman, thank you. Let's jump into the first question. I'll direct it to you, Ms. Levitt, first. We have an opportunity to talk about a number of different issues today, but I'd like to talk to each of you essentially about style. We have lots of issues, but let's talk about breaking through that partisan gridlock in Congress. As you both know, approval ratings for Congress's current and past have been poor for several years, and voters want to see results and progress. Is there an example of a specific issue that you believe can be worked on across party lines immediately? Who and how might you get that done?
Certainly. Well, I have broken with my party throughout this campaign in passing a truly balanced budget. The truth of the matter is the out-of-control, unmitigated spending in Washington, D.C. is a product of both Democrats, certainly, but also Republicans, too, who have voted for more than $5.5 trillion in new spending over the past 2 years, which is leading to the inflation crisis that is hurting families and businesses across this first district. I'm one of the few Republican candidates across the country that will say I will fight to pass a truly balanced budget, as we've done here at the state and local level in New Hampshire. And again, my opponent, Mr. Pappas, spoke about bipartisanship and results and problem solving, but the truth is this. He has voted with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden 100% of the time. When he's been faced with voting for you and your family and your business and less government, he's voted for more government, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi, 100% of the time. He's never taken a vote out of party lines. Send me to Washington, and I will be the independent, business-friendly voice that we desperately need in this economic crisis.
Ms. Levitt, thank you. So, Congressman, 1 minute. Is there a specific issue or a way in which you might be able to work across party lines immediately? How and with whom?
Sure, absolutely, and I've been doing it. And as far as I know, Joe Biden's not a member of Congress. He doesn't have a vote. Nancy Pelosi rarely votes on legislation. And the fact is, I've challenged both of them when they've been wrong for New Hampshire. Now, I chair the Bipartisan Small Business Caucus in Congress based on my local business experience here in Manchester. I work with Republicans on issues about how to strengthen our workforce. One of the things that we've been focusing on is the lack of H-2B visas and seasonal visas for our small businesses that can help strengthen our workforce here in New Hampshire. Frankly, politics has been played around this issue by both administrations, but we just recently saw an announcement by this administration based on our work pushing them to announce more visas coming to small businesses here in New Hampshire. We've got more work to do to streamline that program, but this is exactly an area where Republicans and Democrats can get together and find ways to strengthen our workforce. We've been doing it.
Thank you, Congressman. Ms. Levitt, I'll come back to you. What do you believe is the top issue, the pressing issue facing businesses in New Hampshire, and what have you been hearing on the campaign trail about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's been the honor of my life over the past year and a half to tour so many exceptional businesses across this district and speak with business owners of both small and large businesses who employ so many wonderful people, hardworking people across this district. And the three problems I hear about are inflation, inflation, inflation. 8.2%. My opponent passed the Inflation Reduction Act back in August and lauded it as a measure that would reduce inflation, and it actually has hiked it. I'm hearing from restaurant owners who cannot afford to purchase the goods to put on their menu to provide for their consumers. I'm hearing from folks in our hospitality industry who are lacking the labor that they need because of the tax and spend policies of the Democrat-led Congress and Joe Biden right now, which again, Chris Pappas has supported 100% of the way. I will fight to stop the spending, to end the runaway inflation, and pass a truly balanced budget while also rolling back the federal government's involvement in our business community. We need less government so our businesses can thrive, not more federal government on the backs of our hardworking business owners.
Ms. Levitt, thank you. Congressman, the top pressing issue that you've heard on the campaign trail and in your experience facing business?
Well, it is costs and how we lower costs for folks and shore up our supply chains and address the impacts of inflation on our businesses and families. Now, Caroline Levitt worked in the White House for Donald Trump as a paid spokesperson. She supported all of the spending during the Trump administration, which added $8 trillion to our national debt. She even criticized Democrats in the fall of 2020 for not doing more stimulus, spending more money to rescue the economy. There were necessary steps we had to take. And we have to focus now on how we lower those costs. So we've passed legislation to address the issue of out-of-control prescription drug prices, reining in the profits that the big pharmaceutical companies are earning. We've addressed the issue of high energy costs by ensuring that there are rebates available for folks to weatherize and to modernize the way that they develop their energy, and also investments in renewable energy sources that can create 30,000 good-paying jobs right here in the state of New Hampshire. So this is about how we have an all-of-the-above strategy today with respect to energy, but also how we're looking to lower bills for tomorrow, and we've done that work.
Congressman, as a follow-up, Ms. Leavitt mentioned it a second ago. Can you talk about your perspective on the Inflation Reduction Act? And do you believe that it has delivered on a promise, or does it need to be fixed? Is it flawed? What's your take?
It was signed into law last month, and it's an important bill for the first time to negotiate lower drug prices with the big drug companies. Lots of folks have talked about this, including former President Trump. We got it done. In addition to that, we're capping out-of-pocket costs for seniors on Medicare, $35 insulin, free vaccines for seniors. Now, on the other side of it, on the energy side, we're providing rebates for businesses and families to be able to install heat pumps, energy-efficient windows, rooftop solar. This is going to reduce their energy bills and also ensure that we're more energy efficient moving forward as a state and as a nation. The bill also will pay down the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars, an estimated $1.9 trillion over the next 20 years. So this is a balanced approach to how we lower costs for families right now, and I was proud to support it.
If I may, please. The Inflation Reduction Act spent another $750 billion, your tax dollars, another $750 billion on top of the $5 trillion that has already been spent. Everybody knows you can't spend more money to reduce inflation. That's not how the economy works. And so you're stealing tax dollars from these hardworking people to pass your pet projects. And also included in that bill that's very, very, very harmful to our business community is the hiring of 87,000 new IRS agents that will snoop into your bank accounts to find ways to steal your money to pay for the socialist spending sprees of the Democrats in Washington, D.C. Yes, that's absolutely true, and it's a point that you consistently forget to bring up when you talk about that $750 billion piece of legislation.
Well,
30
Scott,
seconds.
If I could, on that issue with the IRS, I've taken on the IRS. When they wanted to get information about people's private personal accounts and individual transactions back at the end of last year, I was one of the only Democrats in the House to stand up against that and help stop it. And this will get the IRS back to where they were in 2010. It will provide better customer service for a lot of taxpayers that are experiencing delays right now in getting their returns processed, their refunds issued. But it will also make sure that we're going after wealthy individuals and big corporations that aren't paying their fair share and are skirting the law. So that's the fair thing to do. This legislation reduces the deficit over time. It's fully paid for. It won't add to inflation, and it will actually lower costs for folks in terms of their energy and their health care.
Ms. Leavitt, I'd like to give you a minute in response if you have anything to that, but the Congressman also mentioned your time at the White House and was talking about the financial and fiscal challenges and decisions that were made. How do you feel about those choices that were made by the Trump White House while you were there?
Well, in 2018, when I was applying for the position in the White House and when Congressman Pappas was elected to office, inflation was 2.4%. Today it's 8.2%. Gasoline was $2 a gallon. Today it's over $4 a gallon. And this Democrat-led administration, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chris Pappas included, have worsened our economy over the past 2 years. And he keeps bringing up lowering costs. The cost of everything in your life has become more expensive, from gas to groceries. And so we need to go back to the policies we had a few years ago, which was less government, lowering your taxes, cutting regulation, reducing red tape, and getting the government out of the way for our business community, unleashing the might of our American economy and bringing jobs back home as well.
Congressman, before I go back in, would you like to offer your perspective on inflation, how to tackle it?
Sure. Well, those are a lot of great talking points, but I didn't hear any solutions there that are going to actually help lower costs. What we need to do with respect to energy is make sure we have an all-of-the-above strategy today that looks to strengthen the supply of energy. We've been looking closely at this winter to make sure that we're stopping exports to other countries and taking care of the needs of folks here in New England first. We've also worked to make sure there's a record amount of funding in the LIHEAP program to provide the kind of support that homeowners need who might be struggling to pay their bills. And as we move forward, our efforts to secure supply chains, to make sure that we're making more things here in the United States of America, to modernize regulations around shipping, are all bipartisan steps that can help address this. And the way we continue to work to lower costs is by working together. Let's put all the good ideas on the table and see what's going to work, but it takes more than just attack lines and talking points to do it.
Ms. Levitt, he's mentioned energy costs and prices. It was actually one of the questions that we were going to ask, but considering you've leaned into it, let's talk about that just a little bit. Can you share with us your energy policy in ways that we might be able to lower costs short and long term?
Yes, please, because this is also a major issue that I hear from the business owners and the hardworking people of the Granite State every single day. Electric rates are 4 times as high as they were last year at this time. We're seeing an increase of price at the pump every single day, and this is because the Joe Biden administration, Chris Pappas has supported it 100% of the time, has waged a war on our domestic energy production. On day one of Joe Biden's presidency, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline. Chris Pappas supported that measure. They shut down fracking and drilling on our federal lands, which has led to a decrease in supply. So it's very convenient for you to start chanting 2 weeks before an election that you want to increase our domestic energy supply when you have supported decreasing it every step of the way.
It's not true.
What we need to do is revert back to the policies of 2 years ago, unleashing our domestic energy production, reversing Joe Biden's bans for drilling and fracking on federal lands, and ensuring we're tapping into the resources here in the United States of America to ensure we are energy independent and that we're also exporting this oil and this energy to our allies around the world.
Congressman, 1 minute.
Well, that's just not true in terms of my position on energy. I've been pushing the administration to make sure that we have the necessary supplies available that we need to power our homes and power our businesses. Now, the big oil companies have thousands of leases available to them that they have underutilized. And they've worked not to bring production back in the way that they could have post-pandemic when production was dialed way back. Instead, they want to keep prices artificially high so that they can reap record profits at our expense. So this is not just the case where the government can turn on the faucet. We need the private sector to step up to the plate and sacrifice some of their profits and stock buybacks and do the right thing by the American people to make sure the supplies are there. Now, we tried to pass price gouging legislation to give the government additional oversight over how oil and gas are priced in this country. Republicans blocked it because they're content with big oil having these record profits. So that's something we've got to challenge. We've got to make sure the domestic supply is there, that the assistance programs are there to provide people the help that they need, and I'll absolutely continue to do that.
The domestic supply will not be there as long as we keep electing people who do not give our industries confidence in the market, that they can tap into these resources and produce supply for the American people. You've also offered a solution, which is to tap into our strategic reserves. If you're nodding your head in agreement, those reserves are supposed to be there for wartime. They're strategic reserves for a reason. There's no need to deplete our emergency reserves in this country to lower prices before an election season. That's shameful. And secondly, Joe Biden and this administration and the Democrats in Congress have been begging our adversaries, OPEC and Venezuela and Russia, to produce oil for us. In fact, Congressman Pappas took money from a lobbyist for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline in Russia while he supported the war on our domestic energy production right here in the Granite State and across this country. We need a congresswoman who believes in domestic energy and truly will support an all-above energy approach to produce more supply and lower prices for you. I will do that. Chris Pappas has not done that, and that's why we're all paying a lot to fill up our home heating oil tanks this winter.
30 seconds.
Well, the fact is I have fought for renewed supplies, renewed production post-pandemic when we saw incredible disruptions. And we need an energy strategy that's looking around the corner as well. Not just can we drill more today, which is necessary to provide for our homes and businesses and fuel our cars, but what kind of renewable energy sources that we can create for the future. Now, during the Trump administration, they tapped the strategic reserve several different times. We weren't experiencing a war at that point in time, but we did it now in a way that meaningfully lowered gas prices at the pump for people by an estimated 30 cents. You oppose that effort. We still have 400 million barrels in the strategic reserve, but that was a common sense step to help reduce the price of gas, and I'm proud to have supported it.
Final 30 seconds.
Yeah, please. Well, the future of renewable energy, let's be very clear, is what looks like what's happening in California today, where you have a Democrat politician who runs that state that is telling his citizens that they must purchase a certain type of car, electric vehicle, by 2035. when they can't even keep their lights on for their homes and businesses. That's what the future of the Democrat policy, energy policy looks like. We cannot allow New Hampshire to become California or New York. We need a congresswoman who stands to unleash our domestic energy production, not someone like Chris Pappas who will side with the very radical energy policies of his party.
Let me change topics here for a moment, and if you'd like to return to it in answers, please do. But I'd like to focus on workforce. New Hampshire's business community obviously needs a stable and talented workforce to grow and to sustain itself. What are one or two priorities or policies you think are important to attracting and retaining workforce talent right here in New Hampshire? Ms. Levitt?
Certainly. Well, first and foremost, I'm proud to be the first in my immediate family to graduate from college, my alma mater right here, St. Anselm. And so I very much value trades and skills. And we need to increase the partnerships between our local and community colleges and our high schools to ensure that we are equipping young students here in the Granite State for the jobs that are needed. We have a major labor crisis in our state right now. First, because the government has been paying people a lot more to stay home than to get back to work for far too long. But secondly, because of our failing education system. Our nation's report card came out this week. I'm sure you all saw it. It was very, very scary for the future of our country. Our children are not learning at the standards that they should be. They are failing in reading and writing and math. And so we need to ensure we are increasing our academic standards here at the state and local level in New Hampshire, not allowing the federal government's involvement to continue the detriment to our children. And teachers' unions, which are controlling our public school system and are also paying for my opponent's campaign. I support parents being involved in our local education system. They know what's best for their child and for our students.
Congressman, one or two priorities on workforce.
So I'll ignore that rhetorical smokescreen there and focus on a couple priorities that I think will help strengthen our workforce. First of all, we've got great community colleges and career and technical education programs in New Hampshire. We need to do things like expand Pell Grants and apprenticeship programs that will create pipelines into the workforce in New Hampshire. I've seen several successful ones at Manchester Community College, but we need to make sure the federal support is there for those programs. In addition to that, childcare. We need affordable childcare in this country. We have millions of women and men who are on the sidelines of the workforce who just can't afford childcare and are not working as a result. So by making sure we're providing support for folks who are in this space, greater benefits to folks who are working in childcare, as well as capping the rate that people are paying for childcare, that's going to incentivize a lot more folks to get back into the workforce and also provide a healthy start for our families and for our kids too. So these are some things that can help. The other issue I would mention is housing. I hope we can get to a fuller discussion about housing because that is completely unaffordable in New Hampshire for many families that are just starting out right now. And if we want to build the workforce of tomorrow, we've got to have access to affordable housing, childcare, apprenticeships, and other job training programs.
Congressman, let me move forward now with some infrastructure conversation. Transportation and infrastructure are key backbones to economic growth. Do you believe the federal government is doing all it can to support investing in infrastructure here in New Hampshire? How will you ensure that the road and transit projects here in the 1st Congressional District receive their share of federal funding?
Well, it's an important issue for me. I sit on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. We passed a major bipartisan bill last year, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which has already sent significantly more money to New Hampshire to invest in our roads and bridges, high-speed broadband, our water systems, our airports and ports, and to rebuild this country in a resilient way. We had a significant backlog when it came to road and bridge projects, redless bridges that continue to fall in a state of disrepair in this state. By investing, this is good for our economy. It's good to create transportation networks and the backbone of success. I was proud to be with the Secretary of Transportation in Manchester recently with Mayor Craig announcing a significant grant through our efforts that is going to revitalize the Mill Yard and create local connections within the city of Manchester. Kudos to them for winning that grant, but we're going to work with communities all across New Hampshire to make sure that they have access to some of these discretionary grants as part of the infrastructure law, and also make sure that folks know the formula funding that's coming to New Hampshire for roads, bridges, water systems, and all the things that will help ensure that we're putting people back to work and having safe, strong communities.
Ms. Levitt, your take on the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and your priorities for infrastructure.
Certainly. Well, infrastructure and transportation should be an issue that is bipartisan. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, we've seen it become very, very partisan. And the Infrastructure and Jobs Act that Chris Pappas supported, New Hampshire was actually 50th. 50 of 50 states on the list for federal funds received. Now, that's not really being a good spokesperson for our state if we are coming in last place to every other state in this entire country. It also added $250 billion to our deficit, and it included billions and billions of dollars for climate projects and renewable energy sources across this country. So it was not a straight infrastructure bill. I will always support federal funding for infrastructure projects to increase access to rural broadband, to improve our roads and our bridges, and ensure we're providing for those good paying jobs, but not at the cost of taxpayers and not when they include millions and billions of dollars in pet projects for the Democrat Party.
Anything you'd like to add?
Well, there were no pet projects, and it was a bipartisan bill. In fact, it was the biggest bipartisan achievement in Congress in a generation. I was proud to work with Republicans and Democrats to pass that law, and it's making a difference for New Hampshire. Now, I've also led the fight in the House to change the highway formula that's been in place for more than a decade that disadvantages New Hampshire. We actually got it in the House bill, but unfortunately it didn't stay in the final bill. We'll keep working on that, but this is a 47% increase in the amount of money coming to roads and bridges in New Hampshire. So for you to be against that means you're against rebuilding our communities, against creating good paying jobs, against a bipartisan accomplishment that folks should be proud of and should look for more ways to work together to realize additional cooperation in Washington that can address other pressing community needs.
What I am against is, again, passing billions and billions of dollars worth of spending sprees that have led to the 8.2% inflation that we are all feeling. I'm all for improving our infrastructure here in our state, but not at the cost of billions of dollars to taxpayers, not at the cost of $600 every single month that is being robbed of families across this state right now because of the $5.5 trillion in new spending that you have rubber stamped over the past 2 years.
This is an investment. It's an investment in secure supply chains. It's an investment in our transportation infrastructure. These things create efficiencies for business. They allow them to get their goods to market more quickly. Upgrading rail systems, upgrading our ports, our port infrastructure. We've seen how clogged the ports have been over the last few years. By modernizing shipping regulations and making investments in ports, we're helping to unkink these supply chains and create efficiencies that are going to lower inflation.
Let's move on to healthcare. Ms. Levitt, many New Hampshire businesses and residents are still struggling with the rising cost of health care. If elected, what will your approach be to achieve progress on this issue that delivers meaningful relief to those struggling to pay for their health care?
Yeah, well, certainly healthcare costs are being felt by families in this district every single day. In fact, it's one of the most impactful rising inflation measures that we've seen over the past year. 6% increase in your healthcare costs over the past 2 years under the leadership of Joe Biden and Chris Pappas. My healthcare solutions will be to increase competition in the marketplace, to ensure there's more competition, which will in turn lower costs for you, the consumer, and then results in better care for all. We've seen Chris Pappas support greater government involvement in our healthcare system time and time again, which is minimizing the flexibility of our state and the affordability of consumers like you and I. I will also support small businesses like my family's in grouping together to increase their negotiating power against the government. We need to also allow consumers to purchase insurance, health insurance across state lines. That will be a huge, huge priority for me when I'm elected to Congress. And then thirdly, if I may, I think I'm going over my time here, but price transparency efforts as well. The healthcare system is one of the only systems in the world where you can shop for a good or a service, not know the price of that good or service until after you purchase it. We need to push for tangible solutions to ensure transparency for healthcare costs.
Ms. Levitt, thank you. Congressman, healthcare costs.
Well, healthcare is important. I see this as a business owner, and I know that providing healthcare to workers is something that's good for their families, good for their productivity in the workplace. That's why I believe that healthcare should be a right and not a privilege in this country. We're all better off when people see a doctor, get access to the care that they need. Unfortunately, Caroline Levitt supports 100% repeal of the Affordable Care Act, which would jeopardize Medicaid expansion here in New Hampshire. It would jeopardize the essential benefits that we all enjoy on our health care plans. Now, we've taken steps to lower costs. We've passed legislation that's going to save the average family of four $1,600 off their health care if they get their plan off the exchange. We've pushed lowering prescription drug costs. That's good for folks across the healthcare system. I know as a business owner that was 15 to 20% of our healthcare costs was the cost of prescriptions. We're also working to modernize telehealth regulations to ensure that the changes that we've made for the pandemic continue to be there so that folks can see a provider, can see a specialist, can get online to get their health care in an efficient and cost-effective way.
Ms. Levitt, any take on the Affordable Care Act?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do support repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act with a system that works for everyone and is more affordable for you and your business and your family. The fact is, since that bill was signed into law in 2009, we've seen a 130% increase in premiums. And I remember well, as I'm sure you all do, that the president at the time said you'd be able to keep your doctor if you liked your doctor. That was not true at all. It forced businesses to purchase very expensive healthcare plans that they could not afford, and that promise was not delivered on. So we need to always protect pre-existing for pre-existing conditions, for folks with pre-existing conditions, but find free market-based solutions to the rising healthcare costs that we are seeing, and we do that with more competition in the marketplace, period.
45 seconds.
Well, the Affordable Care Act is a free market solution because it allows people to shop for a plan that works for them, works for their families. It also ensures that there are minimum standards for health care, which is really important, including for protections for individuals with pre-existing conditions. Now, expanding Medicaid in New Hampshire was one of the best steps we had to address the opioid epidemic, covered more than 50,000 individuals in our state, has provided people access to addiction treatment, behavioral health services. That is good for all of us in New Hampshire. So if she has her 100% repeal and Medicaid expansion goes away and coverage for people with pre-existing conditions goes away, people are going to be worse off here in New Hampshire. It's also going to be bad for business in New Hampshire. I remember as a business owner pre-Affordable Care Act seeing rate increases of 15, 20, 25% sometimes in our premiums. We've got to work to constrain costs. We can do that, but we have to make sure that people have coverage that's going to work for them when they need it.
Congressman, you mentioned the issue before, and I'd like to focus on it for a couple minutes, and that is the topic of affordable housing. It's a pretty hot topic here in New Hampshire at the state level. As we all know, mortgage rates have skyrocketed over the last even several months. The inventory in New Hampshire for homes for sale is reasonably low in this competitive marketplace, and prices have jumped precipitously over the course of the last few years. Do you think that the federal government can step in and help in this arena? If so, what would that plan look like?
Well, this is an issue that requires cooperation and a whole of government response, not just federal, but certainly state and local. One of the things we need to realize is communities taking a look at their zoning regulations, having the expertise to take a look and remove restrictive zoning that can prevent dense, affordable housing from being constructed in certain communities. Now, the federal tools make a difference. The Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, the Community Development Block Grant, the Home Program, these all are tools that developers utilize when constructing additional units in New Hampshire. And hats off to communities like Manchester that are seeing hundreds and hundreds of units being built out. Many of them are going to be affordable for residents that want to live and work right here in the Queen City. So we've got work to do on this, but it's all about cooperation, public and private sector cooperation, whole of government response. We'll continue to work to expand some of these federal tools that have been helpful in realizing critical development. But this is an issue that is so important to businesses. We're 20,000 units short of where we need to be in terms of housing. And if we don't do something about it, we're sending a lot of young people and a lot of working people out of our state that we need right here in the economy.
Ms. Levitt, your take on affordable housing.
Yeah, the housing crisis in our state is having a direct and immediate impact on the labor crisis that is impacting our businesses every single day. They can't hire enough help because there's nowhere for our help to live. And this is an issue that particularly impacts my generation of Granite Staters who are graduating from our wonderful higher education university system, but they can go down to Boston and live for cheaper and make more because we don't have the supply that they need. This has been exacerbated over the past 2 years. This is not a buyer's or a developer's or an investor's market right now because of the tax and spend policies we've seen. The supply chain has been incredibly disrupted. It's very expensive to buy the supplies that one needs to build affordable housing in the first place. And so developers aren't investing in that housing that we desperately need because of the inflation measures over the past 2 years. I'll give you a quick example. In fact, last week, I sat down and had lunch with one of the leading developers in this city. He's a previous supporter of my opponent, no longer because of what my opponent has done to our business and construction community here in the state of New Hampshire. He has 3 affordable housing projects that have been passed. The permits are approved. He's not digging because it's going to cost him 3 times as much as it would have last year. We need to stop the runaway inflation and everything else will fall into place.
Anything?
Well,
Okay.
no, I think we'll move on to that.
Okay, so Ms. Levitt, let me ask the next question to you. This is sort of a unique situation because we're on the other side, more or less, of the pandemic. Certainly the curveball of all curveballs that was thrown at all of us in terms of our healthcare, our own personal finances, the economy. It impacted every aspect of our lives. Through the course of the last number of years, both Presidents Trump and Presidents Biden have contributed great deals of funding packages to try to fuel the economy, to try to offset a recession, a depression, whatever terms you'd like to use. Given that both presidents have taken similar action, can you analyze the effectiveness of these investments into the economy? Did they work?
Well, certainly initially when the pandemic began and we were not clear what the consequences were going to be, people needed help and they needed it immediately. So the first round of the Paycheck Protection Program, which is a program that my family needed during a time where the government was telling us we may or may not have been had to have shut down. There was a lot of uncertainty in our economy and our businesses needed help. And so that's when the government does good work and reaches out to those in the community who need it desperately. However, we've seen throughout the pandemic that unfortunately, as Joe Biden took office and the Democrats took control of Washington, D.C., they were using the pandemic as an excuse to pass more legislation and billions of dollars worth of bills down in Washington, which has led to this inflation crisis. One lesson we should all take from the pandemic is this: the government should never be able to deem your business as essential or non-essential. Every business in this state is essential because people depend on you for your livelihood by collecting your paycheck every single week. I will be very mindful of that when I'm in Washington. Give more power to you to make those decisions, not the bureaucrats in D.C.
Thank you, Ms. Levitt. Congressman, your take on the pandemic responses by both administrations.
Well, I think the response was needed given what we were facing as a nation, and these programs were a critical lifeline to so many businesses that I've been into and folks that I've talked to in New Hampshire. Talking to Peter Ramsey over at the Palace. The Save Our Stages program that we passed was a lifeline to the Palace, probably kept them afloat. Restaurants on Elm Street. I was at Diz's Cafe today talking with Judy, the owner of that business. She accessed some of these federal programs, said it kept her afloat, kept her in business. So this was about preventing businesses from closing altogether, preventing people from becoming chronically unemployed, getting shots in arms, getting kids back in school where they belong. There was significant support in the American Rescue Plan that did that. And now as we recover, we're at a different stage. We've got to make sure that we're doing all we can to return fiscal responsibility to Washington, to cut the deficit. I've supported legislation to do that. I will continue to look at it. But no doubt, the efforts that we undertook through both the Trump administration and early in the Biden administration helped New Hampshire's economy come back and is evidenced in the 2% unemployment rate we have in New Hampshire today.
It was a major topic on the campaign trail pre-pandemic and was obviously overshadowed by the challenges we all faced. But the opioid epidemic continues to rage. Congressman, I'll start with you first. Because it still remains one of those pressing challenges that impacts so many aspects of our economy, of our local municipal operations, of our neighborhoods, can you share with us what your focus will be in responding to this continued challenge?
This is a very personal challenge to so many folks in this room and across New Hampshire, and we've got to continue to work to get it right, to make sure the federal support is there to sustain community-based efforts, evidence-based programs that are working, that are saving lives, that are opening doors of opportunity to folks to get the treatment and recovery services that they need and deserve. Now, in talking with members of law enforcement, folks down at the high-intensity drug trafficking area along the Mass-New Hampshire border, they know that this is both an issue of supply and demand. And so they're very supportive of efforts to open up opportunities for folks to get care, to get the help that they need, to stay in recovery where people are for a lifetime. But we also have to go after the substances, the precursor chemicals that are coming from China, the cartels in Mexico that are bringing these substances into our country, into our communities, and try to stop the flow of illegal substances. I've actually passed legislation signed into law that has automatic scheduling of all these fentanyl analogs. We have to stay ahead of the cartels. I was talking with the police chief up in Laconia not too long ago, telling me about shipments coming through the dark web. So it's coming in other ways too, and we've filed legislation to address that. We'll continue to work on both sides of this issue. It's so important to New Hampshire.
Ms. Levitt, the opioid epidemic.
Respectfully, Congressman, you've done nothing to help this issue over the past 2 years. Your party, your president, Joe Biden, has allowed for a wide open southern border crisis. It's led to more than 4 million illegal people in our country, but more tragically for our state, it has led to a 50% increase in fentanyl overdoses right here in the city of Manchester. And so these wide open border policies are having a direct result on fentanyl plaguing our communities. And I'm proud to be supported by the law enforcement community in this race. The New Hampshire Police Association and the two leading associations right here in the city of Manchester, law enforcement associations, are supporting me because they know I will actually stand for border security and law and order in our streets. Our law enforcement community is on the front line of this issue, seizing this fentanyl every single day. They've seen the direct increase in our communities and cities like this one in Manchester, and unfortunately, Congressman, respectfully, you've done nothing to push back against the Biden administration to stop the flow of illegal drugs into our communities.
Congressman?
Well, that's not true. And everything doesn't have to be a political talking point. This is an issue that unites New Hampshire, that brings people together. And I'm really proud in Congress to serve as part of a bipartisan mental health and addiction task force. We've moved a number of bills through the House. We're seeing 10 times the amount of federal funding invested in local efforts here in New Hampshire that are making a difference and are saving lives. And we do have to go after the trafficking and the cartels, and I've done that. The only one in Congress this term to pass a piece of legislation dealing with fentanyl signed into law. I've supported efforts to increase the amount of technology and manpower along our southern border that's going to help interdict deadly substances that are coming through those border checkpoints and up here to New Hampshire. So I'll continue to work with law enforcement on this issue. I continue to hear them out. I've introduced legislation, some of which has passed into law, and we have to work on this in a compassionate way for the folks who are struggling, but also in a way that goes after the cartels and those that are purveying these substances that are killing people here. That has to be our commitment, and it should be bipartisan.
Ms. Levitt, anything you'd like to add about the opioid epidemic in your plans?
Yeah, the facts don't support what you're saying, Congressman, and it sounds great. It really does. The alleged bipartisan work you've done has not been signed into law, and this president, Joe Biden, has allowed for a wide open border that is leading to an increase in fentanyl overdose here in the city of Manchester. The facts prove that. Last year alone, 100,000 Americans lost their lives to fentanyl. It's the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 30. This is a deeply personal issue for us all, but it's been exacerbated by the open border policies that Chris Pappas has supported 100% of the time over the past 2 years. We need to elect leaders who really take border security seriously and who will go to Washington to fight for border infrastructure and security, and will fight for our law enforcement community who you promised you would protect qualified immunity for them, and you voted against it. That's why they're supporting me in this race. If you want law and order and border security and to truly stop the illegal flow of fentanyl into our communities, I ask for your support in this race.
Anything you'd want to say?
Well, again, I've pushed the Biden administration to develop a strategy with respect to our southern border. I've been one of the only Democrats to be speaking up on this issue. I've passed legislation on this subject. I'll continue to work with Republicans and Democrats on actual solutions and not just talking points that sound good in the middle of a campaign.
Ms. Levitt, let me move forward, and if you'd like to say something, please do. This chamber represents a specific geographic area, but many of our interests among business owners and business leaders are international. Whether it's trade or visas or simply improving international business connections, what ideas do you have that you can share today that might help expand our interests abroad?
Yeah, well, certainly. First and foremost, HB2 and J1 visas are incredibly important to our business community here in New Hampshire. And I speak to business owners all the time, particularly in our restaurant industry, our hospitality industry, who are really relying on that legal foreign work to produce the jobs that they need and get through the especially seasonal businesses, the busy summer and winter seasons for our tourism industry here in New Hampshire. This administration actually put a cap on the amount of legal migrant workers that were allowed to come into this country. Meanwhile, we have more than 4 million illegal people invading our southern border. And so that's a problem that we need to address, is addressing our legal immigration system, ensuring those J1 and HB2 visas are available for our seasonal businesses that rely on them so very much.
Thank you. Congressman?
Wait, what was the question?
Basically, what ideas and plans might you have for being able to enhance international business for New Hampshire-based business and companies?
Well, it's critically important, and I've worked with the Defense and Aerospace Consortium. I've worked with our Export Council here in New Hampshire that does tremendous work supporting New Hampshire businesses that export. We've got to make sure that we're growing the markets for New Hampshire businesses all around the world. That's why I've supported trade strategies that will help put us at an advantageous position, including modernizing the NAFTA trade deal and implementing the USMCA trade deal. With respect to visa workers for our businesses that are here in New Hampshire, that are serving New Hampshire customers, that's absolutely crucial. That's why I've led the effort in the House to increase the number of visas that are available to these businesses, push back against both the Trump administration and the Biden administration when they were playing politics with these visas, because it's about putting the needs of New Hampshire businesses first. So we'll continue to work with businesses that export, folks that are involved in the trading space, ensuring that they have access to the business programs, to the technology that can help them take advantage of new markets.
Ms. Levitt, in this campaign, there are a lot of other people outside of the two of you on this stage who are weighing in on opinions, on views, on issues. And I would like to offer actually each of you a chance to perhaps set the record straight on an economic or business issue. Is there any part of your record, your agenda, your ideas that are specific to the economy or to business that have been maybe mischaracterized by any outside groups or folks that you've heard from and you'd like to set the record straight?
Yeah, certainly. Well, my opponent continually labels me as an extremist, and frankly, I think that's laughable. It's not extreme to want to put the families here in New Hampshire's 1st District first. It's not extreme to want to unleash the might of your own economy. It's not extreme to want to unleash our own domestic energy production here at home to produce supply for our people, to lower costs at the pump for you, rather than begging our adversaries around the globe to produce oil for us. It's not extreme to want parents and moms and dads to have a voice in their child's education. And it's absolutely not extreme to want to secure your southern border and ensure that our nation has law and order. None of these policies are extreme, and that's a mischaracterization I would definitely love to address. And anyone who wants to stand for border security, law and order, fiscal stability, I ask you to join this campaign.
Thank you. Congressman, is there a part of your record or agenda specific to the economy or business that has been mischaracterized and you'd like to set the record straight?
If I could address her extremism, it's extreme to want to overturn a democratic election in this country. It's extreme to want politicians to be making choices for women and not trusting women to make those choices. It's extreme to want to privatize Social Security. So look, a lot has been said in this campaign. I think she ran an ad with a hammer and sickle over my face at one point in time. I'm a small business owner. I'm a practicing capitalist. I believe that by working together, we can achieve great solutions for our economy here locally and for our country. People here know my record. That's why I'm supported by Democrats, Independents, and Republicans in this campaign, why I'm supported by the U.S. Chamber as well as organized labor. I envision a collaborative future where we put a sense of common purpose as Americans first. We're all on the same team after all, and we've got to start acting like that.
Any more?
Good.
Okay. Congressman, next question. Supporting and bolstering an environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion is important to Chamber and its board members and vital to the strength of the business and community. Can you share some insight about how you would promote and celebrate diversity, DEI, in Congress?
Well, that's so important, and as a lifelong Manchester resident, I can say how lucky we are to live in a city with a vibrant new American population, a vibrant refugee population that adds so much character to our community and strength to our economy as well. Now, I chair the Oversight Subcommittee for the Veterans Affairs Committee in the House, and I've worked on these issues because the fastest growing group of veterans is women, but yet VA care isn't always positioned to serve women veterans. We're working to address that. We're also working to deal with the legacy of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, where LGBTQ plus veterans still can't access service and benefits who may have been shunted out of the military during their service just because of who they are or who they love. That's wrong. So we need to create an inclusive future in this country. I've been doing that with respect to our veterans, making sure we respect all of their service and that diverse veterans, including women, get access to the care and benefits that they deserve.
Thanks you. Ms. Levitt.
Yeah, well, I'm all for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm all for including the best and the brightest minds at your small businesses. And I'm all for diversity of thought. No business has ever succeeded, no breakthrough idea in entrepreneurship, in business, and American ingenuity has ever come to the table with a table of like-minded individuals. And so I want you as business owners in your community to bring the best and the brightest to the table for your companies, to unleash our economy and to provide for our state. I don't support government mandates that tell you that you should hire a certain amount of people based on gender or race or class or sexuality. That's un-American. You know best as a business owner, and I will always trust you over the government.
Thank you. Ms. Levitt, as a follow-up, one thing that you both have in common is that you both come from families that owned and operate to this day small businesses. So given that experience and the active amount that both of you have played in those business operations, what do you plan from that perspective to bring down to Washington to be a voice and an advocate for small businesses?
Yeah. Well, my upbringing in a small business family here in New Hampshire is one of the reasons that I believe in fiscal conservatism and believe in less government. You know, neither of my parents went to college, and they started their businesses from nothing. I'm very proud of them for that. And I watched scooping ice cream at our family-run ice cream stand that the government makes your life more difficult. When you have 15 people on your payroll and you're worried about your workers showing up for their shift, you don't have time to deal with the government's crap. You just don't. And so it's my goal as the congresswoman of this district to get the government out of our way, to allow you to decide what you pay your workers, not from federal mandates from the government as my opponent supports, and to ensure that we're lowering taxes, putting more money back in your pockets that you work so hard for every single day. Again, it is an honor to be in this position because of my upbringing here in a business family, and I'm very humbled by the support I've received from small business families like my own across this district who know I will be a truly fiscally conservative voice for them in Washington, D.C.
Congressman, what have you learned from your family-owned operation and business that you take to Washington?
Well, how to bus a table or wash some dishes first and foremost, but a number of things beyond that too. New Hampshire is a state with great entrepreneurial spirit. Small business is big business in New Hampshire. We have a diverse set of small businesses that have diverse needs in my state. And I've been really lucky to get to know them over the last 3.5 years. Proud to be able to serve as the co-chair of the Bipartisan Small Business Caucus in Congress. We've got a 105-year-old family business that's been going for 4 generations. I'm looking at my dad who's in the front row. I don't know how he got the day off today to come over here. But it's a lot of hard work, Late nights, early mornings, 70-hour weeks. We're blessed to have a great team that we work with. And really early on, I was taught about hard work and about how what you do each and every day is about serving others. And it's an extension of the community, really. How you interface with folks out there from diverse points of view, but just figure out how to listen to them and how to meet their needs. And I think there's a great connection between that and what I try to do in public service every day.
As we start to wind to a close, there are obviously some similarities of the work ethic between these two and how they were raised. But I'm wondering, was there a person in your lives, Congressman, I'll start with you, who specifically inspired you to jump into the public service element? You both worked in small businesses serving others, but who got you into public service to run for office?
I don't know where that came from, but I think it's probably has to do with the small business experience and just being connected to the community in so many unique ways through the work at the business. New Hampshire's a state without a lot of professional politicians. You know, you got your federal delegation, you got your governor, but everyone else is part-time. It's a citizen-led government that we have here in New Hampshire. It's grassroots. It's connected to the people and stories of New Hampshire. And that's why, in my role, I try to get out there as much as possible to connect with people directly. You know, I'm not the kind of member of Congress who's going to trend on Twitter or who you're going to see on social media or on cable news a lot, but you may see me showing up in your community and talking and listening more than anything else. And I think that's just been born out of the business experience and what I was doing before I got to Congress.
Ms. Levitt, who inspired you personally?
Well, certainly not my family, since they are business folk. In fact, when I told my parents I wanted to run for Congress, my dad's reaction was, well, you're going to ruin my life. And he may or may not be true with that. It's certainly a hard game that we're in, and I do applaud you, Congressman, for stepping into the arena as well. But my introduction to politics actually was right here on this campus, St. Anselm College, and I sought out every opportunity that I could, which then led me to the White House working at a young age. I had the pleasure of chatting with some students on my way into the auditorium and told them, seek out every opportunity you can at this place because you might just run for Congress someday. This is an exceptional school, and in part because of our first in the nation primary, that is so, so important to the lifeblood and the backbone of our political culture here in New Hampshire, and I will always fight to protect that in Washington.
We'll move to closing statements in just a second, but I have to also note that both of you happen to have slung a lot of ice cream in your days as well.
Yes, indeed.
Like when someone's offering ice cream, are you running for the hills, or do you still have a favorite flavor?
I do.
Okay, favorite flavor?
Chocolate.
And?
Probably Oreo.
Okay, all right, so there you go. For those keeping track at home. All right, let's move now to closing statements. Thank you very much for all of you being here and for the two candidates for offering a very spirited exchange of ideas for our future. Based on the coin flip, time for a 2-minute closing statement. Ms. Levitt, you can go first.
Well, thank you so much again to the Manchester Chamber for hosting today's debate. Thank you, Chris, for joining. Thanks all of you for showing up. Thanks to those at home watching. As I've said, it is the honor of my life to be your Republican nominee in this district. And we desperately need a change in direction for our state and our country. I want everyone to ask yourselves, are you and your employees and your family better off than you were 2 years ago? The answer, the facts prove, is no. When Congressman Pappas came into office in 2018, inflation was 2%. Today it's at 8%. Gasoline was $2 a gallon. Today it's at 4%. We cannot continue to trend in this direction. We literally cannot afford another 2 years of Chris Pappas being in office. If you want someone who will stop the unmitigated spending in Washington, D.C., who will end this runaway inflation, who will truly lower energy costs for you and your family, and lower the price of home heating oil as we head into this very scary winter, who will support a secure border, stand up for our law enforcement community, then I ask for your vote. I'm proud to be endorsed and supported by our Governor, Chris Sununu. He desperately needs a fiscally conservative friend in Washington. I look forward to working with him and all of you to ensure a better future for generations like mine and those even younger than me, and to protect our New Hampshire advantage. Thank you so much, and I look forward to serving as your Congresswoman in January.
Ms. Levitt, thank you. Congressman Pappas, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Scott. Thank you, everyone, for joining the conversation in Carolina. It's good to be with you, and we'll see you out there over the next couple of weeks, at least one more time. But I'm very proud to be able to be your congressman, to represent my home district in Washington. I take the job very seriously, and we've been through so much over the last several years. This pandemic, the economic calamity that it caused our communities, the global energy issues that we've seen as a result of the invasion in Ukraine, and so many other challenges. We've got to own up to them. And we've worked in a bipartisan way to pass major legislation that is going to help. And we need other solutions on the table that are going to move our communities, our businesses, and our economy forward. I'll always put the interests of the people and businesses of New Hampshire front and center, because that's what I've done during my time on the Executive Council and my time in Congress. Now, there's a stark contrast in this campaign. Now, Caroline Levitt supports what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe v. Wade and allowing politicians to make this decision that's very private and personal for women and families. She supports privatizing Social Security and gambling people's hard-earned retirement on the stock market. She also is an election denier that would have voted to overturn the vote in 2020. And that's just wrong for New Hampshire. So we need more than just political talking points, more than just the extreme agenda that Caroline Levitt represents. We need someone who's going to show up in New Hampshire, who's going to be there for our communities, who's going to be listening and taking those stories to Washington to make sure we're doing things that are lowering costs for our families and businesses, that are strengthening our workforce, that are ensuring that our affordable housing stock is growing and not shrinking in New Hampshire, that's investing in our infrastructure, that's making sure we're making more things here in the United States, including critical components like microchips and semiconductors. Those are the things that I've been focused on. I'll continue to focus on them in the coming years if I can earn your trust and support for another 2 years in Congress. So whatever you believe, get out and vote. This is an important election. We need everyone's voice in this conversation, and let's figure out how we can move forward together with a sense of common purpose as Granite Staters and Americans. Thanks so much, Scott.
On behalf of the Greater Manchester Chamber, please absolutely applause to both. I got in the way of that one. On behalf of the Chamber, thank you very much, our presenting sponsor, Bellwether Community Credit Union, and of course the Institute of Politics for hosting. Thank you all very much, and again, don't forget to vote. Take care. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to see you.